but it is being worn today by Ander Okamika of Burgos BH. Do stay with us, folks. If we have too much more delay waiting for live pictures, we will give you a little preview of what happened yesterday and a run through that one. Well, for those of you who have been away on a break, we are still waiting for live pictures of the second stage, the shortest stage of Archidona to Alcalá la Real. If we don't bring you these pictures, we're going to show you a little replay of the finish of yesterday's stage. So if we do get live pictures, I suspect we'll be cutting back from a replay of the finish from yesterday. Well, for those of you who are still with us on digital, once again, on behalf of myself, and everyone here at Eurosport GCN, apologies for the delay in bringing you live pictures. I've just promised you a review of yesterday's stage, and unfortunately that's only going to be shown to those who are watching it on linear television. For those digital viewers, do stay with us, because as soon as we have those live pictures linked up from our host broadcaster, we will be bringing them to you. As I said, our linear viewers being treated to seeing the pictures from yesterday's stage. You can, of course, catch all of that back on the GCN app, on GCN Plus. It is, of course, not the only thing on, because we're in a very, very busy week of racing, and I'm going to give you this information just so you know what's happening. But for goodness sake, don't go and tune away, because actually the programmes and the races are very nicely phased this week to allow you to watch pretty much all of them, because overlapping with this race and shortly after our finish is our coverage on both linear and digital here at Eurosport GCN, and that's coverage of the Volta Algarve. And you may well have seen the finish from yesterday's sprint win by, I won't give it away to you because you may not have seen it yet, but it was a fantastic finale yesterday. It looked really good. You'll be able to catch our colleagues Dan Lloyd and Adam Blythe bringing you that one all 5 days, mirroring this race right the way through to Sunday. Also on our network this week, there's the Tour des Alpes Maritimes et du Var in France, and that runs from tomorrow, Friday, right the way through to Sunday, and that is with our colleagues Jose Bean and Matt Stevens. Sunday, of course, is the day that the UAE Tour begins, running all the way through next week, and you'll be able to catch that with Carlton Kirby and Magnus Backstead. Those of you who are watching this with us right now will be able to see the UAE Tour from Sunday, except, sadly, those of you in New Zealand. There are no rights restrictions on the Tour des Alpes Maritimes et du Var or the Volta Algarve either. And don't forget, all of these races and the clips and highlights from them are available live and on demand on our digital platforms. Just find them all by clicking on the race poster of your choice on the GCN app. And for those of you who are still with us live and looking forward to seeing the live pictures, please do feel free to tweet me your predictions for the stage, as some of you have done already. I am at Jez Cox on Twitter. One that came into us nice and early from Georgia, who runs the @cycling_talk podcast, predicting that Mike Woods might be a good shout for today. And actually, I would have agreed with that based on the the Canadians' form and the kind of climb we're going up at the finish here today, but the Israel Premier Tech rider has withdrawn from the race overnight, not starting this morning. Not entirely sure why at the moment. I hope everything's all right there, because we are hearing of smatterings of COVID-related withdrawals. I'm not saying his withdrawal is anything to do with that, but across the sport this week. And of course, this race itself has had 3 high-profile riders not starting yesterday and withdrawn from the start list very shortly beforehand. Winner of the race in 2019 and 2020, Jakob Fuglsang, is out due to a COVID precaution. Vincenzo Nibali, Tour de France champion, of course, riding for Astana, Kazakhstan, is out with a confirmed COVID positive, but he hadn't started the race yesterday. And likewise, Alejandro Valverde, the record 5-time winner of the Vuelta Andalucia Ruta del Sol, not able to start in what he has announced as being his final year of racing. So a shame not to see Valverde racing on the roads in his Movistar colours. Interesting enough, though, he was replaced by a rider we've not really seen on our screens yet, Ivan Sosa, having made the move from Ineos Grenadiers at the end of last year, so he was the late replacement for Alejandro Valverde. And as we continue to eat into these first and second category climbs, of which we have many over the next few days, it'll be interesting to see how Ivan Sosa goes. Super talented Colombian climber, of course, not the only climber in there. There's Aina Rubio as well for the Movistar team. The Colombian we will all be watching today, though, Miguel Angel López, Superman López, up this finish. The last time we finished up here a year ago, as mentioned by Brian and I, the winner was a British rider, I'm proud to say, Ethan Hayter, with a very dominant seated driving display over the cobbles that takes him up to the top of the Fortaleza de la Mota here in Alcalá Real, where we're looking at pictures right now on your screens. Miguel Angel López was second on that occasion, just 7 seconds behind Ethan Hayter. A third place finisher on this stage last year was Sven-Erik Bistrom of the UAE Team Emirates. He is not here this year, but Carlos Rodriguez is the Ineos Grenadiers rider, who's still only 21 years of age. At the age of 20 last year, back in May when this race was held last year, Carlos Rodriguez was 4th, and he's come on, if anything, he's come on even more since then. We suspect he is Ineos Grenadiers' leader for this week. In this race, so a great opportunity for him to take the reins of Ineos Grenadiers. He knows this finish well after last year. Look out for the dark blue and red of Ineos Grenadiers leading their young super talent Carlos Rodriguez to the finish. So once again, the current race situation, our 5 leaders have now under 4 minutes, so that lead is coming down, and they are Kamil Malecki, the Polish rider, the only non-Spaniard in today's breakaway, but he is also the first world team rider in any of our breakaways, because yesterday all of our 8 riders were from pro teams for this Pro Series race, part of the 2nd division of Elite World Cycling. And then we have the 4 Spaniards in the company of Malecki in that breakaway, and they are John Barrenechea of Caja Rural, Gotson Martin of Euskaltel Euskadi, and it is, I do believe, Raul Garcia of Kern Pharma, and not Jose Parra, as I previously mentioned. And they're in the company of Diego Sevilla of Eolo Cometa and Gotson Martin, probably the most experienced rider in that breakaway of 5, riding for Euskaltel Euskadi. So no teammates in there today like we had yesterday, with the 2 Sportlander and Baloise riders making it count, Lindsay de Wilde and Rune Herregods. And Herregods yesterday after the finish pointing out just how much work had been done by Lindsay de Wilde that we didn't always see on camera as we were looking back to our chasing peloton. And in the end, they made it count. Brian and I talked in the finish yesterday in the run-in about how potentially there's a little bit of pressure on those 2 Belgian riders for the same team. When you've got 2 riders from the same team in a breakaway anyway, you always should be looking to play the game to make it work. And in the end, that is exactly what happens. I have to say, looking at the way Rune Herregods came into the finish yesterday in Isnaha, I think he might have won, whether Lindsay de Wilde was there or not, because he looked like the strongest rider, that's for sure. So do bear with us, folks. Thank you for your patience, for those of you who are still there. We had a similar problem with our host broadcasters bringing you live pictures, of course, from the Saudi tour that Brian and I were bringing you just a couple of weeks ago. And I know we have some very loyal listeners who enjoy hanging on with us, so thank you very much for that, folks. It will be worth it when we bring these to you, because I can tell you again, as you can see from the live pictures here at the finish, we are treated to glorious sunny weather today, ever so slightly cooler as the riders head further northeastward into Jaén province. But they are crossing for the second of 3 days in a row through Isnaha and over the same bridge that we came across yesterday just before the finish. Having done that, because they've already been through there today, by the way, they actually go left and around the hill we finished up yesterday before heading to carrying on northeastwards across the edge of the Sierras Subéticas, which is the national park, and skirting the edge of the mountains there, really, heading into Córdoba province before then dipping into Jaén province, which is a lot drier, dustier, and also to a certain extent higher as well, because we're in that direction, getting up ever closer to the Sierras de Cazorla, which is where we finish on Sunday stage, finishing with a long, quite tough 7k climb, which the organisers believe this year will be the key to the final general classification. The gaps, of course, at the moment in the general classification after stage one, very small indeed. The whole of the top 7 separated only by 30 seconds right now. Rune Herregaard's on top. Stephen Bassett, the American, after his strong climbing and good finish yesterday for Human Powered Health, he sits 2 seconds behind the Belgian Herregaards. And Ander Okamika of Burgos BH, as well as looking after that green points jersey today, Rune Herregaards, he sits in 3rd right now. It's all set to change today, though, I suspect. Xavier Isada of Euskaltel Euskadi in 4th. And the best placed on general classification of those who weren't in the breakaway, of course, Alessandro Covi, who made that daring late attack yesterday, a really hard one over the top, well, following the blistering attack of Zdeněk Štibar from Quickstep Alpha Vinyl. In the end, Štibar fading over the top, but he looked really powerful when he took off, that's for sure. Gonzalo Serrano, who was the last winner at that finish where we were yesterday in Isnaha, also finished strongly once again. The sprinter for Movistar just behind him, well, he was just pipping Matteo Trentin on the line. Trentin had also gone clear, and Serrano came up alongside him, just pipped him on the line. Next of those potential GC favourites for this week, the Frenchman Benoit Cosnefroy of the AG2R Citroën team. So welcome to coverage of stage 2 of the 68th edition of the Ruta del Sol, the Vuelta Ciclista a Andalucia. We've had a slight delay, slightly longer than we'd like, in bringing you live pictures. Our host broadcaster having a few issues along the way, but thank you for sticking with us. As you can see, as previously mentioned, glorious sunny day, perfect conditions, not too hot, very, very light winds today too. And we're seeing pictures here of the chasing peloton in yesterday's stage, chasing down an 8-rider breakaway made up entirely of 8 pro team riders, so second division riders. There they are, 2 of those Belgian riders from the Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise team, Lindsay de Wilde and Rune Herregods, working well together and encouraging the others to keep pressing. The peloton, by all accounts, after the finish yesterday, having done a lot of looking around and wondering of each other. There was a final bolt, though, between the first 2 finishers at the line. It was the Belgian Rune Herregods there, driving for the line and managing to stay upright against Stephen Bassett. Herregods, the 23-year-old, taking the biggest win of his pro career so far, and a brilliant result for the American Stephen Bassett too. It was Ander Okamika of Burgos BH who topped out the podium in third. Now let's have a look at the map for today. Stage 2, again heading northward, crossing over the same bridge that took us to the finish yesterday in Isnaha, and heading northeastward. But having done so, it snakes its way in between the various national parks along the edge of the Subeticas, heading in the direction of this place you're looking at right now, the Fortaleza de la Mota, and the famous cobble climb, now famous after that win last year of Ethan Hayter. It was a properly grippy affair, as Brian Smith was telling us earlier. For those of you who saw it last year, or perhaps those of you who were lucky enough to be there and see it live, will know exactly what that climb is like. It's a real test with some tough, very bumpy cobblestones as well. It's not your smooth town-like cobblestones. These are nothing like the ones you're looking at right now from the sign-on this morning. Proper hardcore cobbles for our finish today. So a few looks at the sign-on this morning in Archidona in Malaga province. Glorious sunny conditions to greet the riders as they were ready to roll out. Getting a look there at Ander Okamika of Burgos BH, looking after that green points jersey for our race leader Rune Herregods, the yellow jersey of course taking priority. Ben O'Connor there, the Australian rider for AG2R Citroën. I suspect, from what I heard after the finish yesterday, talking his fellow riders there through what happened to him on the descent, lost his chain in the run-in yesterday, had a bit of a panic to try and get back near to the front. Well, the fact that he's even mentioned the panic tells us that he is very serious about the general classification this week, Ben O'Connor, and a rider that quite a lot of people watching are picking. But there is our current race leader in the yellow jersey, Rune Herregods, 23-year-old Belgian. And there are your jersey wearers on the front row, as they were just before 1 p.m. this afternoon local time in Archidona in Malaga province in Andalucia, the hottest part of Europe. And you can see why, early season in February. It is a glorious place to be racing. This was the neutralised start not long after 1 o'clock as they headed in their direction to get right here 150 kilometres later, the shortest stage of this race. And we're reminded there of the results from stage 1 into Isnaha after that kick up from the bridge. Mark Christian in 6th place there, the British rider, the final remaining rider of the original 8 who were out there on the road together. They worked well together yesterday too. I do believe we are now looking at live pictures as they roll their way once again through the olive groves. We are in the middle section of the course right now. It's a rolling section that takes us between the Puerto Salto del Caballo, which is our 3rd category climb. 5 categorized climbs today, and here we are looking at the 5 riders in our breakaway. And it is Raul Garcia, as I mentioned, for the Equipo Keln Pharma. And alongside him, Kamil Malecki, the Caja Rural rider we're looking at there is John Baraneccia, and the sole world team rider there for Lotto Soudal is Kamil Malecki of Poland. And alongside them, Diego Sevilla. So for those of you who are just joining us, thank you for your patience while we waited to bring you live pictures. There are, as you can see, 46 kilometres remaining of this 150-kilometre stage 2 from Archidona to Alcalá La Real, the same finish we had last year, up the cobbles, steep, nearly 12% gradient on average as it gets up to the top, that bring them up to the top of the Fortaleza de la Mota. Right now, 2 minutes and 20 is the gap being given to our breakaway of 5 riders. 4 Spaniards and the sole Polish rider, the sole rider from the world team as well, Lotto Soudal, that is Kamil Malecki. And the gap is now coming down. They had about 4.5 minutes at one point. So as I mentioned, alongside me today, as he is all week, is double British champion and Olympian Brian Smith. Brian, it looks like a slightly cooler day out there today, doesn't it? Ideal racing conditions.
It's perfect racing conditions for everybody involved, and you know, such as the weather down here. And I think many years ago, a lot of the teams used to come down to this part of the world, and you know, for training camps, early season training camps. I know I've been here, and this is why, you know, this race kind of evolved many years ago, because there's so many teams training in this area. But since then, as we all know, they've started to go to other places in Spain. You know, they've gone to the Canary Islands, you know, various other places to do the pre-season training. And it was very difficult to do pre-season training, especially when the Australian races were there, the Tour Down Under, which unfortunately because of COVID has been out for the last kind of couple of years, but that will come back, I would suspect. So it's always very difficult. A lot of the teams now are training in December training camps so that they can get all together, because it's always good when you go to a training camp, because it's the only time that the whole team are together, because then you go off to your kind of separate race programmes. Every now and again you'll bump into someone at a race that is on your programme the last time you saw them at the training camp. So but these have been pushed back to December now, so kind of late November, December are pretty much the only times now that the whole teams are together.
Well, if you are just picking up our coverage this week, this stage 2 of 5 of the Ruta del Sol, it's worth noting the history of this race. It's nearly it is 97 years old this year, and it's always been a really important race on the calendar. One of the most important one-week stage races in Spain as well. It is part of the Pro Series, which means it's the second tier down in world cycling. And you can see already, we saw this yesterday, just how important it is, particularly to the pro teams. Brian and I had a little chat yesterday about the whole relegation and promotion question that hangs over the world teams this year in terms of maintaining enough points. I'll remind you how it goes again. The 10 best placed riders for each of the world teams on the UCI rankings, those UCI points are added up to see which teams are near to the drop zone down the bottom, and likewise teams can then be promoted up from pro team status to world team status as well. The yellow and blue here are of the Sport Vlaanderen Baloise team, who are of course working to protect the lead of Bruno Heregaard's yesterday's winner, our race leader. We did suspect yesterday, Brian, that really that's their race made now, isn't it? But of course this is the done thing, I guess, for their team to be protecting that lead and working at the front.
Well, they have got the race lead, and I think Heregaard said yesterday they will try and defend it as long as possible. Maybe today, you know, he doesn't have a huge lead, but you know, that type of finish, you got to remember it was 200 kilometres yesterday, early season race. They put a lot into it, especially the breakaway, to try and stay away. So the legs will be a little bit tender today, but you know, thankfully he's got enough of enough teammates to kind of help him on this stage today. It's quite a shorter stage of 150 kilometres, and I quite like that, kind of mixing in the kind of shorter stages. It just means that, you know, with the longer stage yesterday, you know, it's a little bit more aggressive today, and we can see that by the 5 riders that are in front. And we can also see that, you know, Bike Exchange, we saw them coming up yesterday and trying to bring the gap back, and, you know, never got too much reward from the efforts they put in. But I think today is a different day. We heard an interview, unfortunately some may have heard it, some may not have heard it, from Simon Yates. It might be played in, you know, later on, but Simon Yates is here. He wants to kind of test himself, and this is a finish that will suit him as well. So Bike Exchange are helping with the chase with the Sport Blander, and you can also see that UAE have sent a man up there in third place. But I have to say, credit where credit is due to you, Jez. I thought by the information that I was getting about the finish yesterday, I thought it might have been a little bit hard for Matteo Trentin, but boy, did he look good yesterday.
Oh, I'm glad I got that concession out. This is a rider, I'm supposed to be impartial, of course, but Matteo Trentin is a rider I seriously rate and have done for a number of years. That's no big shakes. That's pretty easy to do. But he's such a wonderful all-rounder. And I still think potentially his sort of 5-day to 1 week stage race capability might be slightly underrated. Maybe this might be the week when we see him come good. He certainly looked good yesterday. In the end, he was just pipped by Gonzalo Serrano on the line. But that was quite a useful one yesterday, Brian. As you said, we'd be watching two races. The race for the win within the breakaway, but then also the race for time gaps in amongst our main peloton. And it now gives us a clear indication of who's serious about this Ruta del Sol, doesn't it? We had Benoit Cosnefroy right up there alongside Matteo Trentin, finishing on the same time as him, but also Simon Yates, Simon Clark, the Aussie, now riding for Israel Premier Tech, having made that move over the winter, of course, from EF, and Mauri van Sevenen as well. So there's some names there that are not just up at the front of that peloton by chance, are they?
No, everybody that wants to try and do something in the general classification was in that group just behind. Anybody losing time, they'll have to kind of play catch up. As you know, no time bonuses in this race, no time trial, so they have to make it up in the uphill finishes.
Yes, it's a wonderfully simple race, particularly in its most recent guise. The last 2 years, including this year, no time trial, no time bonuses out on the course either. So very simple race. 5 constantly jagged days. It's even making it tricky for us to pick out what we see as being. We always like to have a queen stage we build towards. It's normally, in a race of this length, normally the penultimate day. Now, stage 4 does have 2 first cat climbed and a second cat early on, once again looking to set up a smashing a part of this peloton early on in that 165k stage. But really, they're all so jagged. I'll remind viewers who perhaps weren't with us yesterday that the direct translation of the word sierras is actually saw, just like the profile of a saw when you turn it upside down, because that's what every single one of these stages are like, constantly up and down. Although there are, in amongst it, some very long descents. We are on a descent at the moment, or a net descent, of around about 20 kilometres in actual fact, which our breakaway are on right now. You can see the speed they're up to, ever so slightly descending all the time, between the hotspot sprint in La Pedriza, which was taken by Diego Sevilla, the rider in your shot right now for Eolo Cometa, with the light blue jersey, black shorts. They are rolling net downhill all the way down to one of the lowest points of the stage so far today before the long climb. It's categorised about 8 kilometres, but they actually climb a bit further than that, around about 10k, right the way up to the top of the third category, Alto de las Grajeras. We also have another third cat climb just before the finish, in actual fact. It's a lumpy run into the finish today. Another third category climb to get over before the descent to the start of that last ramp. It's 3k up to our finish today, but it's really the final kilometre and 800 metres that it's all about. The final 800 metres are all cobbled. And I was doing my best there, Brian, before we went to the break earlier, to try and describe those cobbles, but you commentated on it last year. I was merely watching it from home. They're pretty meaty cobbles as well, aren't they? Old school.
Yeah, they are, and very difficult to get traction. If anybody got a chance to kind of watch that finish from last year, it was quite brutal. But I don't think the riders will kind of do it justice because it's so steep. The last 600 metres, 11%, but 11% on these kind of tough cobbles is really, really difficult. And I think everybody will know what's coming because they all do their homework, they'll do the research, but most of them will already look at what's the JCN and the replay from last year's race. We've got so many stronger teams this year, and everybody, maybe this is the first time of kind of looking at this type of finish, and everybody will know. But the climbs just before, there's 2 climbs, one it tops with 20 kilometres to go, 1:07.5. I think there could be a kind of selection on those climbs before we actually get into the kind of finishing climb. But, you know, maybe a team like Bike Exchange might want to kind of shake it up, because look at the size of the peloton now. And, you know, Herregods would have loved the breakaway to go away with kind of no danger riders in it, but best placed of the riders in front is Gotson Martin at Euskaltel in the orange at 37 seconds, so they're kind of forced into kind of riding. Luckily they have got Bike Exchange here in the blue and the white, and UE in the red helmet just behind, helping them. Yesterday we had so many teams helping out the chase. They had to, because the gap had gone up to 15 minutes. Today other teams are playing it a little bit cagey. Let the other teams do it, sit back. They're only just over 2 minutes, 5 riders, and they want to save as much as possible for this finale, because today's finale of the stage is quite difficult. So just mention 2 climbs before we go up this very steep climb towards the finish.
Yes, in interviews after the finish yesterday, Ben O'Connor saying it was something along the lines of mind-boggling, effectively, that for the first half of yesterday's stage, riders and teams in the peloton really just looking at each other, letting it go, and in the end giving themselves just too much work to do, and too much, as you mentioned yesterday, Brian, too much descent time as well coming into that finish yesterday, where it's very hard to be getting an advantage for the peloton over our breakaway, of course, travelling downhill at speed. 90 seconds they had by the time they came to the bottom of that final ramp yesterday. We're looking here at John Baraneccia, who took maximum points at the first of our mountain points today. And right now, the virtual general classification, as you said, Brian, is being led by Gotson Martin. But they're going to be losing time. Whatever happens this breakaway, even if they survive like yesterday, they will lose time. And it's now UAE Team Emirates as well, also getting involved with that chase. As are the green, boys in green, and Bora Hansgrohe, who bring a very strong climbing team to this race, bringing with them Giovanni Aliotti, Matteo Fabro and Leonard Kamner. Those 3 in particular are going to be looking towards the next 3 stages of this race too, I think, to effect themselves. And their best finisher in the end yesterday, Emanuel Buchmann, the German, in 17th. Another of their strong climbers, I should have mentioned, really, in a way. So on the front right now, the Polish rider Kamil Malecki of Lotto Soudal, the 26-year-old, swinging off. And good to see a world team rider being allowed to go in the breakaway today. I suggested that yesterday, Brian, that might have helped them with those 8 riders yesterday, all being from pro teams, and it being the world teams who were effectively left behind in the peloton. Today, not quite the case, because we have got that world team rider in here in the shape of Malecki for Lotto Soudal. And there is one of the big favourites for the week, Mikel Landa, right in the middle there, in the red and black of Bahrain Victorious. We've got some big names this week. It's a great field, isn't it? Amongst them, Mikel Landa of Bahrain Victorious, the defending champion Miguel Angel López, of course, the Colombian for Astana, Kazakhstan. Simon Yates leading for Team Bike Exchange Jayco. There he is, in the light blue, light and dark blue, changed kit this year for Bike Exchange Jayco. And alongside our big GC stars, the likes of Yates, Landa and López, of course, we have some big classic stars too. None other than former Olympic champion Greg Van Avermaet, Oliver Naassen, his brother Lawrence Naassen, Florian Seneschal, Zdeněk Stybar for Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl. So a big clash of the classic stars and the general classification climbers this week in the Ruta del Sol. Well, so far, breakaway looking like they're working well together, Brian. They're now under 2 minutes. Many of these teams getting riders in the breakaway for the 2nd day in a row. In fact, all of them, except Lotto Soudal, who didn't have anyone there yesterday. And it's kind of predictable, I guess, having 4 Spaniards in that breakaway in a race which is so important on the Spanish calendar. We were looking back yesterday, weren't we, at former winners of this race going back over the years. Alejandro Valverde, the winningest rider, with 5 victories to his name, unfortunately being withdrawn from this race just before it as a COVID precaution. Hopefully that won't put too much of a dent into his classics and early season campaign. Before him, Chris Froome was the last British winner in 2015, ahead of Alberto Contador and Benja Inowski. But it is a fascinating, as we mentioned yesterday, a fascinating roll call of winners, because you've got every different kind of rider in there. The time trialist Michael Rogers back in 2010, when this race still had a time trial, of course. And then the likes of Oscar Freire, Eric Decker, real classic specialists, Eric Zabel, and all the way back to, as Brian was mentioning yesterday, Freddie Martins back in 1974-75. A fascinating roll call right the way back to the first winner of this race in 1925, Ricardo Montero. There's a few gaps in there, of course, where the race didn't run, but 97 years it's been running for now. Wouldn't mind getting a speed check on this, Brian. That looks like a lovely smooth road, doesn't it, too? Ideal.
Yeah, it's perfect. And, you know, the road conditions have got a lot better in this part of the world, 30, 40 years ago. And I think that's why a lot of the teams stopped coming to this area, not because of the sun, but because of the roads. But we can see here that, clearly they've invested in, the kind of infrastructure, and, the roads are great training. You're almost pretty much guaranteed the weather down here. For those of you that, come down to Malaga or Marbella and things like that, we're just kind of inland from there. And, the further inland you used to come, the rougher the roads got. But, we can see now that there are certainly some investment and, a fast kind of downhill section on a great road. But yesterday was a great day for the breakaway. It's not going to be today because this final is so difficult. There's your speed there, Jez. So it's quite a very fast descent, and all these riders have to be aware of the UCI regulations now of the touch points as they go down. But yeah, getting back to kind of old school, who can be fastest in the downhill. But these are kind of dangerous times as well, as we can see that it's always like a bees swarming around, and at this speed it only takes a slight touch of wheels, and many riders will be down. So yeah, 1:33 for the breakaway inside the last 30 kilometres. We're starting to head towards the kind of 3 final climbs, and that will kind of shake everything up. But I have to say that Sport Vlaanderen have been up to the task today. They've now had a little bit of help from some teams. Bike Exchange have come up in the fluorescent kind of yellow and blue and whites. Bike Exchange have been there, UAE, Bora, to name a few. So we're in for a really, really interesting final now. And I would think a bit of a kind of GC shake-up. Who has got it in the legs? We saw a little bit yesterday, but there's a big difference between battling for, trying to kind of gain some time and actually battling for the stage win.
Yes, big Guillaume van Keursbalk has been brought up to the front for Alpecin Fenwick. So another team there who's lending a little bit of might to the front end to try and bring this one back. They seem super motivated, don't they, Brian, after yesterday, to make sure we don't have a second day in a row where the breakaway survives. A bit of a shame for these guys. They've been working well together, but often, even kind of not far off this stage yesterday, we're starting to wonder whether it would still be pretty standard, the peloton reel in the breakaway, and then we're treated to this very fast uphill finish. Today it's looking a little bit more likely. Yesterday they had enough in hand. The biggest gap we saw today was around 5 minutes, so they've been pegged a little bit more today, that's for sure. We should still have a potential for another indent into that King of the Mountains jersey, currently being worn by Alvaro Quadros of Caja Rural. He still leads technically, but joining him on 12 points now is John Barrenetxea, of his teammate, of course, who is in the breakaway. So they might be swapping that one over come the finish if they can survive to the next of our classified climbs, which is not far off. It's in about 7-8k for our leading breakaway, and that's the Alto de las Grajeras. They actually have 2 more categorised climbs. So if the breakaway can survive to there, then if he can last that long, Alvaro Quadros, John Barrenetxea should have a very good chance of keeping that jersey in the team come the podium presentations after the stage. Oh, the gap is coming right down now though, Brian, isn't it? 1:15.
Yeah, peloton is going at speed. It's just this long downhill. They can definitely go at speed, and as we go back to the breakaway, they're going uphill, so it's kind of obvious that the gap is going to come down. And looking at the kind of body language of the riders in front there, starting to suffer a little bit. But I just want to say that I'm hoping a lot of race organisers will be looking at this route, and it would be worthwhile maybe putting in a slightly kind of uphill finish, maybe something that will suit the GC riders, maybe something that should suit the kind of punchier riders, but definitely maybe not the sprinters, because if that was a flat sprint finish yesterday, that breakaway I don't think would have stood a chance. The sprinters teams would have come to the front. But it was just interesting yesterday and hearing you talking about the interview of Ben O'Connor. I cannot remember the last time any breakaway got 15 minutes. And that's purely because they don't know who it suits. Who's the favourite for the... I was looking at who's the favourite for the stage yesterday, and it was kind of hard to tell. And so when you've got so many favourites, they'll think that, well, we don't want to ride for 200 kilometres. That's going to tire us out for the final. So why don't other teams do it? And that went on and on and on, and it was, it just could have made my day yesterday and things like that. That that breakaway, and you heard from Herrigots after the stage yesterday saying that they were well drilled. They were talking to each other. They were helping each other. It was pretty much an 8-man team time trial, and absolutely nobody missed their turn. And that's the way to do it. And they got their just rewards in the end. So, but yeah, lightning doesn't always strike twice, and I don't think this breakaway I've got the opportunity of doing exactly that. They had other things in mind, but like I said yesterday, you have to be there just in case. But I think everybody knows now where they're at. But always a first stage. I've seen it happen in other races, but first stage is always a case of who's here to do what and who's going to chase. And that game of chess yesterday must have been so frustrating for some teams.
Well, the gap now is under a minute, and the team who's come to the front to try and drill it down even more is the new boys in the World Team block, and that's Intermarché Wanty Gobert. Notably, Brian, you mentioned him yesterday, Domenico Pozzovivo, just about to leave his 30s at the age of 39, signed to that team very late on this winter after the disbanding of Quebec Next Hash. We've not seen him at the front there, but the vast majority of the rest of his team, I saw Jan Bakelans, Benjamin Gourmet and Taco Vanderhoorn up at the front pushing the pace there. Domenico Pozzovivo not there, but I suspect they would be working for him, because this could be quite a good finish for him. It's certainly steep enough, isn't it? If he can rattle his way over those cobblestones coming to the finish, the 39-year-old. We saw him buzzing around the back of the peloton yesterday. But they're there in full effect, so that's for good reason, I'm sure. I have to say, the Sport Blunder and Valois kit doesn't always get the best press. Some people love it, of course. But that yellow jersey does it. It just tops the shorts off nicely, actually. Rune Herrigods looks all the better for it, in my humble estimation. It almost looks like illegal shorts, doesn't it? But it's not. It's a good look.
Yeah, I'm not a massive fan unless it's a kind of dark winter's day of kind of fluorescence. I think you have to be seen. I've got an orange Julia I wear sometimes when I go out at the moment when it's kind of rainy or kind of dark and things. I like that, but in normal summer I'm not a kind of fluorescent type of person. Maybe takes me back to a kind of an 80s rave type of thing when it's all fluorescent stuff. But the rider from Intermarché, I think that may well be their choice today is possibly Kobe Gossens. He's a rider that showed well this year already in some races, and he must be feeling good today. I'd love to see Pozzovivo, but I just don't think... I think it's too explosive for him. But then I said, against Matteo Trentin yesterday, I thought it might be a little bit too hard, and it wasn't. He proven me wrong yesterday. But I really do think that maybe Kobe Gossens is the Intermarché rider that is being looked after for today's stage.
I seem to remember from last year that Ethan Hayter barely stood up on that final climb as well. Seemed to be seated for most of it, using all of his track power. Oh, crash. Quite a big crash. Right in the middle there as well. On that corner, looks like they've slipped on gravel, actually. It's a bit of a change of road surface. Well, let's see who's down, Brian. In amongst it, there's definitely some of the Aular Cometa riders. An even spread of teams too as well. One of the Bike Exchange Jayco riders holding his shoulder. Let's hope he's all right.
I think the most important rider is Miguel López, was involved with that number 1, the winner of last year. Just the centre of the picture, just in the apex of the corner here.
Yeah. Oh dear, let's have a look at it again. I think there's a little, there's a little, just beware between the road joining there's a little bit of gravel, isn't there, Brian? By the looks of it, you can see the dust coming up from it too.
It looked that way, you can see that, you can see the dust coming up. It's always very difficult. They may have kind of tried to sweep it, but yeah, it's quite unfortunate that just a bit of gravel there has brought a few riders down. And you know, we say it all the time. It doesn't. You don't have to be going fast to damage yourself. But I can remember breaking a scaphoid, doing about 5 miles an hour, and put my hand down. So I hope everybody's okay. I think most people will get back. It's just going to shaking a few riders up.
There is the visual gap to our 5 riders. They are doomed by the looks of it. 47 seconds. It's kind of being held at that now, and can't help but think that maybe some of the impetus will have gone out of that chase from the peloton while they wait for potentially teammates and others to regroup. So this will help our breakaway a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised to see them getting a bit closer to a minute, but they are now within visible distance. I'd have thought, Brian, that's probably enough for the peloton to sort of just hold it a little bit while they can see them. They would have been able to see them along that straight road, wouldn't they?
It depends on the teams behind and what they want to do. This is quite a difficult finale, and if someone wants to kind of, tire the peloton out before we get to that final climb, then you start to do it in this climb. We are pretty much almost on this climb now. That the top of it comes for 20.5. It's just kind of gradual to start with. The categorised point of it is pretty much, in the next kilometre or two, but it's only 3.6%. So on this climb, I think a lot of the riders, if you want to make it difficult for maybe some, maybe they kind of punchy riders, the classics riders, because if it's easier towards the finish, Jez, then it will suit the kind of punchy riders. But if they kind of open it up on this climb, which is a fairly kind of long, but it's benign climb, 3.6 kilometres, 3.6%. Then we get descents, and then we've got 5.7 kilometres at 4.6, so a little bit harder. And then we've got the descent and the steep climb. Last year, on the last main climb before we come up to the finish, there was a selection there, and there was a group that kind of chipped off in the run in towards the finish. They were brought back on that last climb up to the finish, but this is the time that if you've got the team that you can do a little bit of damage on this one, soften them up in this one, even, put them to the sword in the second one and go over the top in a very, very select group and kind of test the peloton out. So I don't think it's a case of the peloton are looking at these riders and want to kind of chase these riders back. They've done their job for the day. I think it's a case now of, who wants to take the race on and who wants to kind of try and slim this peloton out.
Well, they're getting ever closer to the top of the Alto de las Grajeras, the penultimate third categorised climb of the day. We're hearing that 3 of the riders who were down in that crash were Aiko Bastains of Alpecin Fenix. He was the Alpecin Fenix rider in the middle of the road. Danny Navarro of Burgos BH and Alejandro Ropero of Aular Cometa. As Brian said, we wish them well. And now we have Vegard Stacker Langen on the right-hand side of your screen, who's doing some long turns for UAE Team Emirates, just slotting back in now. The tall figure. He is the sort of Norway's answer to Tim de Klerk in a way. And wouldn't you know it, it's our Lotto Soudal rider, Kamil Maleki, who's trying to chip off here, and that chipping off has distanced Diego Sevilla. And this is going to be all about those points at the top of this, I suspect, and trying to get over into that valley before being caught. 24 seconds is the gap we're being given right now, though. They are very close to the top. Next to those to go is Raul Garcia of Spain and the Equipo Kelm Farmer in the dark green. And if anything, Kamil Maleki is dropping himself at this rate, because that was a hard dig by him. He's battling to get back on too. Last vestiges
the top of
here,
this
Brian,
climb
isn't it?
comes with 20.2 kilometres to go to the finish, but you know, they're knocking lumps at each other at the moment. I think some of these riders have got an eye on potential, you know, King of the Mountains points. I think Maleki, the Lotto Soudal rider in the red and the white, I think he wants to try and kind of go solo, but you know, to go solo over the last 24 kilometres with these climbs, it's always going to be very difficult. As we look back at the peloton, you can see that some of the teams are putting their kind of workhorses in the front. I think it was Seneschal that was up there looking after Vincennes. He could do well in this type of finish, very kind of steep. Belgian rider, you know, knows his way to get a little bit kind of traction on the kind of cobble section. So there'll be a few teams looking after their riders on this. I'm just hoping that we may get a team that wants to kind of take it up and you know, kind of rip it up a little bit rather than just kind of sitting across the front. Might not happen in this climb, as we see they're all kind of across the road now, but it might happen in the next climb, where it's a bit steeper, it's a bit shorter, and we might see a little bit more of a selection.
Yeah, it's 1 or 2% steeper and a couple of kilometres shorter, that one as well. That should be a decisive point, I'd have thought. The Puerto de las Castillo, which comes, as Brian said, with the top of it is 8k to go. You mentioned Florian Seneschal there. This finish, really, when you think about it, I guess should suit a classics and a cobble classic specialist. It's steep, and as we said, the cobbles are particularly difficult, and it's twisting as well. You lose speed. I seem to remember last year watching on one of the corners, I think it was the final right-hander, watching Ethan Hayter looking like he was going to grind to an absolute halt, and that was the point at which behind him Miguel Angel López was closing in. So I just wonder whether actually maybe Quick-Step Alpha Vinyl might be the team to look out for today. Brian Smith, can I tempt you to put your neck on the block and predict something? I'm going to get in there first, though, whether you're going to predict something or not. I'm actually going to go for ZNX Stibar to do what he did yesterday, but make it count this time. I'm going to say this group is going to be caught after this climb in the valley, and Stibar is going to win. Can I tempt you?
Yeah, sure, you can tempt me. You can tempt me to most things. I think for Quick-Step, Honoré and I would say Mauro Vincennes would be the two riders I would look in that team. But you know, looking at performances yesterday, and you know, I'd love to see something for Bike Exchange, not because he's a British rider and Simon Yates is, you know, they tried hard in the end yesterday to kind of bring it back. They're really up to tempo. You know, I'd like to see him to ride well. I think a rider like Lusenko, with his first win of the season so far this year, I think has to be, you know, one of the favourites. Now that we've seen Miguel Angel López on the deck there, you know, I'm swayed, to be honest with you, between Bennett Cosnefroy and Lusenko. But on the performance that I've seen so far, and he never really kind of showed it yesterday, I would think that Lusenko, with his rides a couple of days ago, has to be one of the favourites.
So you've listed about 6 riders there. You're going with Lusenko. I've got to note these down, you see, Brian, to make sure we know. Right, Lusenko it is then. Yeah, Alexei Lusenko yesterday, 24th, of course, as we mentioned earlier, the winner of Spain's new gravel extravaganza, the Clásica Jaén Paraíso Interior, where we were on Sunday. In this region where we are right now, because we're back in Jaén right now, as we watch the riders, and Alexei Lusenko, as we know, obviously in good form and capable of coping, certainly with the gravel, and rattling along the baby's heads as well, as we may see him doing, going up to the top of Portazella de la Mota in 20k's time, just over 20k's time. Block across the road now, our main peloton as well. Still those blue and yellow jerseys of the Sport Flandre and Baloise, and our race leader, René Herregaards, there he is, still right there in the middle. The gap has gone back out a little bit on this climb. They're nearly at the top now. And we are down to 4 riders as Diego Sevilla of Elo Cometa has been dropped from Group 1. He may have even been absorbed back into the peloton already. I'm not sure if we've seen that. This is Gotson Martin, the most experienced in a way of these riders, certainly on paper anyway, the Euskadi rider with the orange top on. And these riders well aware now of how close they are to catching that group. They can see them. They have been able to see them when the road has straightened out. Well, the peloton have actually already come close to Alcalá la Real, because as they entered it after the last of our hotspot sprints, they then turned left and done an enormous circular route around the edge of Alcalá la Real, taking in the mountains to the northwest of it, and the medium hills that we're into now, and with good reason too. They're classic racing roads, as you can see, twisting between the valleys and the sierras themselves. Quite going up to the steepest points, but certainly making the most of the racing agility of this landscape in the Jaén province. It does, of course, make it very difficult for us to get these leading motorbike shots as well. We had a couple of incidents yesterday where some of the riders were suggesting maybe the motorbikes are a bit close. That one is, of course, right in front of the peloton, but difficult when it's twisting and winding so much to get enough distance between the bike and the breakaway. There you can see it from the air, of course, exactly that. So they still have one classified climb to go after this point. They're over the top of the Alto de la Grajeras and around about 7 kilometres of net downhill now in amongst the olive groves. Now, I'm sure one of the things that Brian and these riders will be very pleased of is the fact that the olive groves themselves, the bushes, tend to be a little bit further back from the road. They're all planted, of course. They're not natural olive groves. These are plantations. Oh, and there is the top of our mountain point. There we go. There was me thinking we passed it without seeing it. So we'll give you that classification. I saw it just from behind at that point between these four riders.
Yeah, it looked like the Cajarual, Barrenechea wanted to keep that within the team, and it looks as if he's done a good job today. A little bit further back now, only 36 seconds, and the peloton's going to come over the top of this climb onto this descent. And we saw it yesterday. You have to, keep your riders safe. Don't care, what level of race this is, but if you've got ambitions in this race, you have to kind of look after your GC rider or your potential stage winner and keep them close to the front. And Movistar are the team that have decided to do that. UAE just behind them. But we come off this descent. We're now inside the last 20 kilometres now. The next climb is a little bit harder than the last one, but I'm sure that we're not going to be riding into town and we all kind of challenge each other up the final climb. We have to see something on this next climb because we haven't seen anything yet. I think that they know that it is a very difficult finish, and this climb is a little bit harder than this one. But the breakaway of only 4 now. We've lost Diego Sevilla of Iola Cometo, but all 4 riders, since they started attacking each other, now we're over the top of this climb. I think they've decided, well, bury the hatchet, look after each other and, try and go the whole way. But with only 30 seconds, and I'm sure with maybe some attacks in this next climb, they're going to be brought back before the finish.
Well, this road carries on twisting all the way down to the bottom of the valley, and then we start a long, straight, northerly heading road, which takes us up into the climbs again once more, and then the start of the Puerto del Castillo, which is that final 3rd category climb Brian mentioned, ever so slightly steeper. It's still 8 kilometres long, though, gradually climbing up, and then a long descent down to the valley, and that final 3k climb up to the top of the Fortezela de la Mota, which the final 800 metres are very steep and very heavily cobbled as well, and twisty-turny too. Everything you've seen so far since we went live looks nothing like what the finish will look like, because it's a spectacular finish today, very unlike the smooth, fast rolling, gradually sloping roads we've seen so far. The minute they get to the bottom of that, it's going to be like opening a box of I don't know what, a box of Rocky Frogs, because that is the top of it. You can see the snow-capped mountains in the distance, And that is the top of the hill we are climbing up towards the top of as well on those cobblestones. It was spectacular last year, and I think it's going to be very similar this year. Best placed rider from last year's finish up here, of course, as we mentioned, as Brian mentioned, Miguel López. We've already seen him on the deck today, so he's been a bit shaken up. We've not heard he isn't back in this group, so we're presuming he is. And the next best placed finisher in there, young Carlos Rodriguez for Ineos Grenadiers, the 21-year-old, is here today. Good experience on this climb. Fifth on that stage last year's was Julian Amascueta of Caja Rural. Now, he finished on third in general classification, so it goes to show how important this stage was last year for the overall general classification. And Julian Amascueta, we barely mentioned so far, the 28-year-old for Caja Rural Seguros RGA. He is here in the race. He knows the finish well. And once everything had exploded last year, he rode himself steadily up to that fifth place finish on this stage. We'll look out for the colours of Caja Rural. Should this breakaway be absorbed? That is yet to happen yet.
I think this will shape the overall. Onto the last stage, then there's a climb up to the finish as well, which is 7.1 kilometers, 5.2. But I think this is where you can make the difference. You can see in that final climb that some of the better kind of GC riders, climbers, they might kind of stay together on a climb like this, but I think there'll be seconds between everybody in this climb. So you'd rather be going into that final day where the kind of hilltop finish, you would rather be seconds in front of others than kind of chasing seconds. So I think this could shape the general classification, and potentially the rider here that wins this stage could go on and win the race overall. And I think everybody knows that, and I think that's why they're putting a lot of effort into today. Although, okay, it's a kind of shorter stage of 150 kilometres, this is so important, this stage. And if you don't have that kind of punchier rider, then this next climb is where you want to kind of try and kind of shake it up. I'm talking about, the likes of Rodriguez. Rodriguez will be there. He showed some good form, the rider from Ineos, and they're coming up on the right-hand side in the reds and the black, and they'll be, or is it navy? But they'll be looking after Rodriguez for sure. Maybe Sheffield as well, as Cameron Worth brings them up. And this finish is going to shoot the punchier riders, but if they try and shed a few riders, break the peloton down in next climb, then it'll probably suit the likes of Rodriguez better.
Well, as we watch the boys from Montemarché Wanty-Gobert doing their bit on the front, this is Theo Delacroix, the French rider for that team. We are seeing alongside them once again Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise. No, there we go, not giving up on this, constantly bringing that yellow jersey of Rune Herogods back up to the front. What a great ride they're doing today, motivated by having that leader's jersey in their fold. Of course, they're not a new team by any means, they're well drilled, well organised, but the entirely Belgian team of Sport Vlaanderen and Baloise are performing well in the heartland of Spain, in a way, the hottest part of Europe. This is, of course, flamenco and bullfighting country right the way down here in the south, and the Belgians are showing they've taken to it well. Still those slender 30 seconds these four riders have. Kamil Malecki of Poland, Lotto Soudal there at the back, there he is. The new leader of the King of the Mountains classification, or virtual leader, John Baroneccia, there he is just in front of him in the colours of Caja Rural, those striped green colours on the white top. And then alongside him, Gosson Martin of the Euskaltel Euskadi, there he is on the left hand side of your screen, the orange top, black shorts. And the rider from Kern Pharma, Raúl Garcia of Spain, the slightly chunkier, more powerfully built rider of these four, just going to the back. Lovely shot, giving you the impression of the speed along the road surface here, the front end of our peloton. Trying to see if that looks like it is moving pretty quick, but I just wonder if there's a little bit of holding going on here, Brian. Quite a bit of looking around, isn't there? A lot of looking around, in actual fact, to see where teammates are.
This is the bottom of the main climb. We do have that final kind of kick up towards the finish, but this is the last kind of main climb of the day, and it's about getting position. This climb is 5.7 kilometres in length, 4.6. And the breakaway riders, they've been trying on the run up towards this climb. They've been trying, but you got getting this climb, and I think you see a lot of them going to really struggle. It's coming right down to 16 seconds because the positioning onto this climb. I'm just waiting to see who's going to take it up. I think one or two teams have to take it up. They cannot just going to wait for the final climb. And the race will be up for takes on this climb and see who comes over the top. I think it will be a much smaller group anyway coming over the top. But the interest for me is who's going to take it up.
Baraneccia goes now. He was responding to an attack there from Kamil Maleki, the Polish rider for Lotto Soudal. And John Baraneccia has looked like one of the strongest of these four remaining riders now today. And he struck out. The rider chasing at the front is Raul Garcia of Equipo Kelm Pharma, the dark green. Now that's a late strikeout to see if he can stay out there by himself. And at the moment, these three not really responding to Baraneccia, the current leader in the King of the Mountains competition for Caja Rural. I'm rather fond of those metallic green bikes they ride on as well. They look smart. I like those. Now, here's a team we haven't mentioned too much of late, and that is Bahrain Victorious. Moving up to the front and on the radio too as well, perhaps looking for where the likes of Jack Haig and Mikel Landa are. They have such an embarrassment of riches in this race, Brian, don't they? Mikel Landa, Jack Haig, Damiano Caruso, Wout Poels as well, second in this race in 2018. So much quality across this kind of terrain as well.
Definitely one of the strongest teams in the race, and this is the stage you want to kind of shine. You were saying earlier on, what is the Queen stage? Well, this could possibly be it. Spectacular finish, and I think everybody will want to show, and Bahrain Victorious definitely have the combination to unlock the door. But we haven't even mentioned, I know you mentioned it right at the start of the programme, is Israel Premier Tech and Michael Woods. This finish 100% suits him. What form is he in? We don't know. I just seen the Canadian champion Guillaume Boivin come up to the front and kind of look after Michael Woods, and they haven't put a nose in the wind at all. Today they haven't been chasing. Even yesterday they haven't been doing much. And sometimes when you do that, you kind of playing smart. You're thinking smart, saving all your energy. And Michael Woods is the sort of rider that if you look around in that final climb and see he's there, then you should be worried. But it really depends on what form he's on at the moment.
Brian, I think it wasn't formally announced, but I was getting the message just before the start that Mike Woods hasn't started today. He was talking in the run-up to this race about being sick, so I think he's out. I'm not sure whether it was listed on the official start list, but that was the latest information I got, because I was looking for him at the end of yesterday's stage, likewise too. Don't think it's COVID related, but certainly sickness related. So I think, not looking to correct you live on air, but I think he might not be in the peloton anymore.
No, you are right. I'm just looking back. He never started today. My apologies.
Not at all. I mean, you're right, though. Absolutely right, because this would have been the absolute perfect finish for him. I mentioned that one of our viewers tweeted me early this morning to say, today is definitely a day for Mike Woods. And that was Georgia from Cycling Talk podcast. She also wasn't aware that he'd been ill, I think, the last few days and did not start this morning. So shame for him as we watch the last vestiges of our breakaway. And Raul Garcia trying to stay out there a little bit longer, chasing down John Baraneccia. Baraneccia's had a good day, and by the end of this, he should have a jersey to show for it too. But in the, once again, elongating late sunshine shadows of February in the hottest part of Europe, here in Andalucia, the most southerly autonomous region of Spain, in the olive groves, we are enjoying early season racing, and I'm sure you are all around the world, those of you who've joined us here on the home of cycling, Eurosport GCN, with myself, Jez Cox, and Brian Smith, bringing you wonderful summer racing. I hope you are spring in the sunshine. You could be mistaken for thinking it's summer, because it's lovely and dry in Jaén province as well. I do hope it's warming you wherever you are watching this around the world. And they're not giving up. Certainly Raul Garcia is not giving up, Brian. Just over 10k to go. I did enjoy that. That was effectively Baroneccia there saying, "Go on then, after you. No, you go. You attack. No, please do." We may as well. We're out here by ourselves. It's a lovely sunny day. Apologies there for those of you who might be getting a bit of sound break up on Brian Smith's words. It's been good so far, so hopefully it'll sort itself out. Little gremlins in the internet machine, interweb machine, that will sort itself out, I'm absolutely certain. AG2R, or As You Deserve, the Citroën team, now right up to the front with good effect as well. Looking to make good for what Ben O'Connor saw as being a real nuisance coming into the finish yesterday, unshipping his chain on the front neck, I think, off his chain rings, having to get it back on and struggling to get back in too. Talking of struggling, well, I don't think he necessarily is, right at the back there, the rider who started the day on second place on general classification is Stephen Bassett in that blue jersey as the points leader, looking like he might be starting to pay for yesterday's really hard work.
Well, I think both of them are. Himself and the yellow jersey right at the back there.
AG2R Citroën combining with Bahrain Victorious now to set the pace. We are very close to the top of the final climb, the Puerto del Castillo. We've got about a kilometre to go to the top of it.
You can just see Innes over to the left-hand side of the screen as well, coming up to the front, as expected. Bahrain Victorious on the right in the red. Like you've already mentioned, AG2R up there. Israel Premier Tech also towards the fore, but nobody really kind of pushing on. I thought maybe a team would want to kind of try and push on a little bit in this climb because there's still a large peloton. Okay, we've seen riders that were involved in the breakaway yesterday, the first two in the general classification, struggling a little bit purely because of their efforts yesterday. But I can only think it's that.
I could imagine As You Deserve Citroën are thinking about leading out potentially Benoit Cosnefroy after a strong finish yesterday, or maybe even Greg Van Avermaet, Oliver Nyssen, those riders potentially for a finish like this. But the work being done by Bahrain Victorious, Brian, is that more, do you think that's more overall general classification focused, or is it all the same thing? Maybe I'm just underestimating this finish and the impact it might have.
I think everybody knows that if you're winning the stage and taking the jersey, you put yourself in a really good position. I don't think you want to wait until the final stage. Tomorrow's a rolling stage, probably a sprint stage. I think potentially looking at a sprint stage the next day, and I think the GC battle right to the end. So I think this is a huge stage, and it will shape the general classification. I think all the teams know that. In these steep climbs, I think they'll be coming across in kind of ones and twos. There'll be gaps everywhere. But on the final day, I don't think there'll be as big a gap. Not unless you kind of feeling really good, you can put time into the others. It'll be a little bit more cagey, I think, on the final stage. But you never know. But today, you want to put your mark in the race for sure. And Bike Exchange have now come up in their new kits, the kind of blue, lighter blue, and white. Eddie Dunbar now looking positioning into that final climb as well, and it gets narrow, and that's going to cause some problems. So you know, a lot of teams will have looked at that final climb and they've given it a lot of respect, because the race is going to unfold in that final climb, which is going to be spectacular.
It is going to be carnage, Brian. You're absolutely right. You said the words narrow. Perhaps for the British viewers or people who are fans of criterium racing, you might know of the famous Durham round of the Tour Series here in the United Kingdom. It's just like that in terms of the cobbles, the steepness, but also the fact that once riders start hitting those cobbles and bouncing around a bit, there is nowhere to go. It's so narrow through those last two turns as well. There is the top of the final classified climb of the day, the Puerto del Castillo. We start the descent now, and as soon as the descent is over, we're straight into the climb, which takes us up to the Fortaleza de la Mota and the fortress at the top, that cobbled climb. Here we go. The next 7.4k are going to be fascinating, and as Brian suggests, they may well be the ones we look back on Sunday afternoon as we bring you the conclusion of this race in Chiclana de Segura. The Ruta del Sol is about to properly light up because the breakaway's back in, and this is going to be a day for the big general classifications favourites in this race. Nervous moments, Brian, while the race is still wide enough for them to move up, because there won't be much more moving up space after this descent, that's for sure. The Spanish team of Movistar in the dark blue with the light blue M's on them, now moving up as well. I wonder if they're thinking about Gonzalo Serrano again, because he looked so good at that finish yesterday. Certainly one for the punchy, powerful riders and keep a heavy bum over the back of their saddle and stop it bouncing around, shall we say. And Serrano, I would suggest, ideally built for that kind of finish. An attack, though, by the looks of it, or is that a rising? Looks like an attack to me from the front of our peloton, Brian.
Yeah, it definitely is an acceleration there. Try to look to see it's Total Energies Bonifacio that's decided to go, but
wow,
I could see him moving up there. He's another rider that we know he can get up climbs, but this final climb, does it suit him? No. I can remember him going on the attack. It was a couple of years ago off the Suppressor in the Milan San Remo, where he tried to go solo, but it looks as if he's got, he's been looked at by, is that Matteo Trentin sitting in second place there? So a few riders will decide that this final climb won't suit them and try and kind of break away. But Total Energies, we said they come here with a depleted team. They're looking for other opportunities, and Bonifacio has decided to have a go. They only came here with 4 riders, so he obviously wanted to show his downhill skills there, but nobody was letting them go.
No, you're right. I think it was Trentin as well marking that one. The powerful barrel-chested figure of Matteo Trentin, the former European champion for UAE Team Emirates. Good to see Bonifacio having a go, though. He's part of a team of only 4 riders that started this race under the stewardship of Lilian Le Breton, the former French pro, of course, who looks after that team. So 5k to go, and only less than 2k left of this descent before they start the rise, which takes them up to the foot of the Fortaleza de la Mota. And we should be able to see it in the background as we look up. You can certainly see the rise ahead of them. Now it's Ineos Grenadiers who take things up. Eddie Dunbar has already been doing a lot of work today, the Irishman. Now back on the front. Such a multinational team as well they've brought to the race this week. No 2 nationalities the same in there. Ben Turner, the British rider, alongside Cameron Worth, the Aussie. Carlos Rodriguez, of course, the Spaniard. Jonathan Narvaez from Colombia. Salvatore Puccio from Italy. Eddie Dunbar, the Irishman. And Magnus Sheffield, the youngster, the 19-year-old that Brian mentioned yesterday. We've mentioned again today. We'll look out for him playing his part in this. Look at the speed at the back of the peloton as they're ripping through these dusty corners. The road doesn't half drop away at these edges as well. It's not always, particularly around these bends, particularly well, what should we call it, edged. There's a bit of a drop off the edge of these as well. Thankfully the rider's safely through that one too. And Ineos Grenadiers are doing what they do best, Brian, at this stage. and looking to really shred it into the base of this final climb. Long lead out for them.
Yeah, just do this steady bar there. I think Ben Turner is setting the second place there, the British rider, 3 kilometres to go. Just line it out and keep your team safe. You don't want to be swamped at this moment in time. And, you know, last year, so different to this year, we're going to see quite a large peloton. And because of the kind of narrow streets and the way it kind of kicks up, it is about positioning. So if you get the firepower, keep your rider safe, because the last thing you kind of want to think about, we always talk about it when we go sprint finishes. You can be near the front and get looked after, and you can ease yourself into the sprint or the climb, and that's probably one of the best ways to do it. Or you can sit back in the kind of melee of, you know, between kind of 15th and 20th, and, you know, teams are moving up. There's a bit of pushing and shoving. There's a bit more nervous the further you back in the kind of head of this peloton. So the easiest place to be and the more relaxed place to be is where Ineos Grenadiers are. So if you're looking after your potential stage winner, then that's the place to be. A little bit further back, you start to get a little bit more kind of bump and barge and moving up and things like that, and that's where you can kind of lose a little bit that kind of nervous energy. So it's a bit more relaxed towards the front, and that's what Ineos are trying to do here.
Here we go, the back end of our peloton is going through the mincer as well. Riders dripping off the back of it all the time under the pressure of Ben Turner. The 22-year-old British rider for Ineos Grenadiers, fresh from the cyclocross circuit, very fresh from the cyclocross circuit. The cross season is not entirely over just yet, very nearly though, but here we are eating our way right the way into European racing. There's our yellow jersey. We're definitely going to have a new yellow jersey wearer tonight. Rune Herregaard's had a brilliant day in the surviving breakaway yesterday, but there he is off the back of the main peloton. The young rider we'll look forward to following these next few years, that's for sure. Inside 2 kilometres to go now to the top of the hill that you can see in the distance there over to the left-hand side as we looked at it. Ben Turner still remaining on the front, getting a few last shouts from his team. Jonathan Navarre back there giving it a good shout as well to keep him moving. And Turner still ringing himself out on the front. The team hanging in behind him and waiting. The colours of Bahrain Victorious doing likewise. And now it's Eola Cometa looking to move up their man as well. Potentially Vincenzo Albanese, I suspect, for a finish like this, a fast finisher who can cope with those kind of conditions. We have about 400 metres to go until we hit the actual private road that takes you up to the top of the Fortaleza de la Mota and the castle at the very top. Ineos Grenadiers still have control of this at the moment. But now it's Bahrain Victorious that take over, Brian.
Yeah, Caruso now riding at the front. Jack Haig sitting in second place. And then Wout Poels. You can also see that, Intermarché have got Girmay just sitting there as well. Stan de Wolf comes up on the left-hand side with Ben O'Connor for AG2R in the white. This is about the positioning is key because you don't want to be trying to kind of make up too much ground. So into the last kilometre now, and it just gets steeper and steeper and steeper as we get to the top.
Well, Benjamin Girmay is in the white with the blue shorts, yellow sleeves, the Eritrean 21-year-old. Lots spoken about him the last few weeks. He's already had a win on the boards this year in Mallorca, I think it was. So he's got the yellow helmet on back there. Very, very fast finisher too. Exciting young rider. Let's watch out for Wout Poels. Ideally suited to these steep rises as well. Don't forget, it gets narrower and narrower from now on in as well. We're inside that final kilometre, and understandably, our helicopter camera struggling to pick the riders out as they make their way through Alcalá La Real. It'll be much easier once they're onto those narrow slopes and the static cameras. Good to see crowds out on a Thursday afternoon, late afternoon, of course, in Andalucia to welcome the peloton in. It's strung out at the front, and we're seeing an attack down the right-hand side of the road at all. One rider going clear there, Brian, another starting to sit up too. Real carnage is Wout Poels, who's decided to strike out alone. The Bahrain Victorious man had been being led up by his team. He's gone very early, though. Wout Poels leads.
Yeah, Wout Poels, and I think it's Covey again. He did this yesterday, coming on to some of the cobbles. Or I'm not saying cobbles, because it does get, rather kind of nasty a little bit further up. But, that was a big effort there from Wout Poels. But, looks like, we're starting to see, what's that, Miguel López is starting to come now for Astana now. He was a rider that was up there and caught out in the crash a little bit.
Miguel López, our defending champion overall for the Ruta del Sol, driving this one down himself. He's got more colours of some of the big favourites around him. Well, Paul's now reeled in. Alessandro Covi for the second day in a row, showing what good form he's in up the steep slopes. And it's our defending champion, Miguel López now. We're now into the private section of road that takes us up to the finish. Covi is trying to hang in there. López looks so good, though. López right in the middle. Alessandro Covi with not long to go now before the very tough coupled section. Here we go. Covi is the first onto it. He's seated, driving hard, trying to make the most of that smooth section up the middle. López, though, how cool does Superman look? Right in the middle of the picture. Miguel López with the number 1 on our back as our defending champion. Can Alessandro Covi hold on? He's got no time because he's won. Alessandro Covi is our winner. Miguel López second for the second year in a row. Alessandro Covi looked so good yesterday. Well, Paul's just across the line there. Ben O'Connor shaking his head. He didn't quite have it today. But the man who looked so good at the finish yesterday, the Italian Alessandro Covi for the UAE Team Emirates. The finish came up on us very quickly. He's done the same thing 2 days in a row, only today he's ended with the victory. Wow, you were right, Brian. What a finish. So impressive.
Yeah, that was an incredible finish. Last year it went on a little bit more, but that was a big effort there from this man from UAE. And we saw a little bit of it yesterday in his efforts, and he gained time and possibly gained confidence as well. Absolutely amazing. He started this year on fire, and when you consider that Miguel López were trying to chase him down, when we go into that cobble section, just watching now, they were all bumping into each other. I think it was Serrano who was up there for Movistar, but Covi, wow, he's on fire at the moment. And Miguel López, I think he finished second last year and finished second yet again. I think it's Serrano, Movistar just taking the third spot there, but yeah, only seconds in it. But this man here, Covi, he's on fire and deserved that victory after his efforts yesterday.
I must say, Brian, I wasn't sure. With about 100 metres to go, I wasn't sure. I thought he'd just gone too soon. He was really looking like he struggled. And if anything, once he found that smooth section, it was here, wasn't it? Right up the middle of the cobbles. He just got back on the power, got his bum over the back of the saddle and really just kicked on. That was it. López, I think, had the climb been a little bit longer, I'm not entirely sure. I'm looking for the markers, the metres to go markers. I'm not sure López was aware they were that close to the finish because he kicked a little bit as he saw the line there. But in the end, no answer to this man who made exactly the same attack as he did yesterday, only this time it counted. Looking down on top of the castle, up on top of the Fortaleza de la Mota, and for the second year in a row, it's been a spectacular finale, and a finale that visually looks so very different from the rest of the stage, with its open, expansive roads in between the olive groves of the Jaén province and rolling its way through Córdoba over those 5 classified climbs today. In the end, though, it has all come down to this climb. As we watch Oliver Nason making his way up, and our yellow jersey as well, showing just how hard this climb is. Rune Herogods is going to give that one away, that jersey. Although we will look, I say that, Brian, we'll have a little look and see where the general classification falls. I suspect, knowing you'll have worked it out already in your head. Me being just numerate, I'm going to probably have to wait. There he is.
No, it looks like, I think Covi's got it. This finish was a little bit shorter than last year for some reason. It went on a little bit last year, but they finished it a bit shorter. Trying to work out the Movistar rider where it was Sosa. It was actually up there for Movistar, but when we look at that finish yesterday and that finish today, Covi has just got the legs and everybody.